Cradle, Dogs of Fount, Chapter 24, Part 2. Text to screen, Nate asked. Within 15 minutes, they got a response from Ramsey. He told them he will be in Camp Malta tonight after 9. Camp Malta was actually a union of 3 different camps that merged together and formed a powerful hub for the warrior class. There were plenty of civilians there too, but the warriors had certain advantages to being based there compared to their civilian counterpart. It was roughly 30 miles away up north, and the way everyone took from the city was to follow River Ipanema all the way there through, though of course there were plenty of obstacles that would require time and care to get past. Before they went to the motor pool, further underground, they stopped and had burgers at the cafe hall 1 floor above the mezzanine. Heather ate slowly, and Nate had almost inhaled his food because he'd skipped breakfast and they had done a lot of walking to get to this base. He enjoyed the milkshake the most and missed the ones back in Dearden and Sisal at the moment because he thought a legitimate comparison was in order. The elevator doors opened, revealing a sea of vehicles in an expansive garage. Nate assumed they'd be busy down here because all the trucks, cars, ATVs, e-bikes, and so on gleamed under the garage lights, and there was sudsy water flowing continuously into the drain nearest the elevator. They were pretty sure that they would be granted an aircraft, but they didn't know what else they would be allowed to take. Their position in this massive tribe was both honored and still an assessment. They had certain privileges indeed. They never had to worry about where a meal was coming from, and their apartments were nice. They regularly talked with chiefs, and other warriors respected them genuinely, but they would always hear statements of judgments about being wet behind the ears, or fountain spies, and even being soft. Anyone who fought alongside Nate or Heather knew they weren't timid in the least, but off the battlefield people became bold in their mistrust for the two. The office for the motor pool was towards the graded ramp down into the lower part of the garage. Nate was enthralled by the vehicles and just wanted to roam around and look and hop in some of them. Heather was still distracted, but she smiled as Nate ogled the hardware. The office was a 1-desk room with glass windows twice the size of a man's height. Nate saw the balding, wide man looking down at a clipboard. As they approached, the man shook his head and threw down the clipboard. He stepped 1 foot out of the doorway to the office. "What do you need?" the man asked. "We need a craft to get to Camp Malta," Nate answered. The man gestured for them to give him their screens. "Screens," he said. They handed him their devices, and he quickly tapped them on a tablet and he just grabbed off his desk. "There ain't no craft available for basic transport, only missions," the man went on. Nate shook his head. It was worth a try. The man handed back their screens. "You can take the ATV over there," he pointed to the black and beefy all-terrain e-bike. It was like the one they rode to Cyprus City, but newer. The tires were just as wide, but there was a larger passenger seat behind the drivers, larger cargo cubbies, and the lights fit into the slim slits instead of the normal round ones found on the older model. "Just one?" Heather asked. "That's right," the motor pool manager answered. "I'm not riding on the back of that the whole way there. You gotta have another bike somewhere in here," Heather said. "That's the only one. You want another, you have to wait till it comes back in 2 hours or so," the man said. "Fine, I'll wait." The man was already handing Heather the tablet to sign, and then Nate signed his name too. The man went back to work in his office after lighting a cigar. Nate and Heather sat on 2 cheap metal chairs next to a 4-door cruiser with an angular front bumper and hood. "Incredible," Heather complained as she crossed her legs and looked down at her data watch. When they reached the River Ipanema, the sun was still up, and it was a little cloudy. It was the first time in a few days that the tactical jacket he wore barely made him sweat it, and that was also due to riding an e-bike. For most of the 3 hours, it felt as if the trail had an overhaul. The path was clearly visible, and there were less debris to worry about, yet there were a handful of times the two of them had to slow down or stop to move large tree trunks, go around boulders, or high waters. When they reached the Tulsa Dunes, Nate felt relief. The dunes were about 3 miles away from Camp Malta. The dunes weren't of sand, but drifting dirt mixed with gravel.